Albie, is Boris the right man to lead the party?
Yes, I think Boris is still the right man to lead the party, but he's had a very, very, very difficult couple of weeks and couple of months. And I think what I and many Conservatives want to see on the other side of Christmas is a real change in the style of leadership, which is coming from Boris Johnson. And I've had a couple of conversations with lifelong Tory voters down here in the South, and also with some members of my family who are white working class and voted Conservative for the very first time in 2019. All of them agree that something has to change, but all of them also agree that they wouldn't vote for anyone else.
Well, that does seem to be the problem. John, what do you think in terms of the sort of polling popularity? How popular is Boris with Conservative Party members?
Well, he's been pretty much down in the Conservative Home regular poll of what do you think of various members of the government, etc. So it's not just a question of the Prime Minister having lost his popularity with the general public. Members of the party are not that enamoured either. But Boris Johnson's got a mixture of two problems. One is undoubtedly self-inflicted.
Wave of Omicron.
And this is that he has this tendency to want to bend the rules to his own will. That style has come unstuck in the last 6 weeks because of the Owen Paterson affair and because of that famous video about the alleged party on the 18th of December. If he's going to get around that, then I think, first of all, he needs to realise that perhaps following the rules is perhaps more important than he's been inclined hitherto to believe. And secondly, when things do go wrong, when people do the wrong thing, it's best to fess up early rather than try to circumlocute and obfuscate. Now, the question is, has the Prime Minister got the style and the self-awareness to make those changes? And frankly, he perhaps is the only person who knows the answer to that question. The second problem, of course, he faces is that he's, to some degree, the victim of circumstance. He's the victim of the circumstances created by the pandemic, a pandemic that has certainly forced the government to think in the longer term about having relatively high levels of taxation and relatively high levels of spending. And that, unsurprisingly, causes difficulty with sections of his party. It's also a pandemic that has required him at various stages to lock down the country. And where now at the moment he is facing a very difficult choice about what does he do in the wake of the revival of the pandemic. And the difficulty there also is, again, many of his MPs don't like the lockdown, and Lord Frost expressed that. But that also overlaps to some degree that concern with the Brexit section of the party. And the Brexit section of the party, some of them, including Lord Frost, are concerned about whether or not the Brexit that they thought they were going to get is going to be delivered. So therefore, keeping his party together has become somewhat more difficult. Now, the trouble is the circumstances are not ones over which the Prime Minister necessarily has control. The question is whether or not he can persuade his party that he's dealing with them as well as he possibly can.
Let's go back to Albie with some of those points that you've made, because it seems that, as Sir John said, he's a victim of circumstance. COVID, came along and knocked a lot of different governments, kicked a lot of different governments out of sync with what they actually wanted to do for their countries. Now Boris had to focus on COVID. He's not been able to focus on the things that he really wants to. Who else could do the job if Boris isn't doing it? Albie, who would you put in there instead if they do oust Boris?
But you see, this is my issue, and I think this is the issue that a lot of Conservative Party members and Conservative MPs indeed have. There may well be some people in the party that want to see a different leader in place. I personally do not. I think now is not the time for a leadership election. But that doesn't mask the difficulty that Conservatives have been having with making Conservative arguments for how to govern a country. It's hard to argue to people nowadays that you should vote Conservative because we believe in people keeping more of their own money because you know how to spend it better than your government, and that we believe that a state should be small but effective and stay out of your way so you can get on with your life. It's very hard to make those arguments at the moment because of everything that's been going on with COVID. And when I was old enough to vote Conservative back in 2015, I voted Conservative for two major reasons. Firstly, was I wanted to thank them for passing same-sex marriage. And secondly, because George Osborne said that we'd have a budget surplus by 2020. It's pretty laughable to imagine having a budget surplus this year, isn't it? And I think that is at the core of why a lot of Conservatives feel this discontent with the leadership at the moment. I think it was underlined by what Lord Frost has said on several occasions about him wanting the UK to pursue a more low tax and a less regulation policy route. We're not necessarily seeing that from the government at the moment, and it's not really been indicated in any of the major policy announcements of this year.